Mr. President,
The senator from Michigan.
I ask suspension of the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, the Secretary of the Treasury is one of the most powerful positions in our government, as we know. The Treasury Secretary has broad responsibilities for the economy, for our tax system, trade, our pensions, housing, and so much more. It's critical that anyone who holds that position use their power to help working people. It's clear to me, Mr. President, that Mr. Mnuchin's policies will in fact hurt middle-class families and working people. There are also serious ethical concerns that neither he nor my Republican colleagues have been able to address. As a result, I will be voting no on his nomination. I'd like to talk about something that has not received the focus that I think it deserves, and certainly that the people of Michigan feel it deserves, and that's the question of pensions and what's happening to pensions in our country. Mr. Mnuchin has a history of fighting against working people and profiting off their misfortune. As we know, pension funding can have a significant impact on a company's bottom line. But losing a pension can destroy a family's bottom line. And it seems that Mr. Mnuchin doesn't know this. When serving on the board for Sears, Mr. Mnuchin played a critical role and a direct role in how to fund the company's pensions. And what happened? Sears routinely underfunded the company's plan, routinely underfunded the company's plan throughout his tenure. Analysts predicted that Sears, quote, massively underfunded pension plan, their massively underfunded pension plan was, quote, a ticking time bomb that could even hasten or bring down the financial collapse of the company. The company used investment return projections that were too optimistic, along with accounting gimmicks, so they could avoid paying into the pension fund. They inflated their earnings on paper while contributing less to the pension. Sears did such a bad job managing their pension fund while Mr. Mnuchin was on their board that the fund only made a return of 1.5%, putting their fund in the bottom 5% of all the pension funds over $1 billion. Is that the kind of results the American taxpayers want when he manages their money? Already, Sears has been cutting its employee pensions. In 2014, the company eliminated the monthly health care subsidy that helped its retirees afford their health care premiums. That saved Sears and Kmart about $6.2 million a year. Mr. President, I've received a lot of letters from Michigan, a lot from families who are very concerned about their pensions. One of my constituents who worked in the trucking industry said, quote, we took small raises on our paychecks each contract so the company could put more in the pension fund. That's what people do, right? They take less every month so they can put more in the pension fund. I know that's in the presiding officer's state, my state, that's what working folks every day do. And they were told, and he says, we were told we would receive a certain amount for the rest of our lives. That is what we counted on for our retirement. Through no fault of ours, over the years, government deregulation of the trucking industry, passing trade agreements and other laws that have devastated the economy have made our pensions become doubtful. Can you imagine, you're paying all your life? My brother drives a truck and counts on the fact that he's working hard every day and putting money into a pension for his family when he retires. And it's supposed to be there, right? A pension is a promise that is supposed to be there. Another woman from West Michigan wrote in, worried about her Central States pension plan. That's the pension plan that my brother's in as well. And said that, quote, "My husband retired from Grocer's Baking Company of Grand Rapids and has a pension in Central States Pension Fund. As you know, that pension is in critical status, and the Treasury Department turned down a plan to save all the pensions. My husband's 74 and I'm 78, and we rely on that pension and Social Security to live on. We rely on that pension and Social Security to live on. We try to save, but it's difficult. We're hoping that the pension will last more than 10 years, but who knows?" Mr. President, I also hear from people in Michigan all the time about how little accountability there is when it comes to the management of people's pensions. One man wrote from Macomb County about his own pension plan, quote, "Why are none of the trustees being held accountable for the bad investments or failure of the plan? I'm sure they all have golden parachutes in place for when they retire. Why do we, the workers, have to suffer because of their incompetence? I'm just an average guy hoping you can help protect the benefits that are due to me so I can enjoy retirement when my time comes." The Treasury Secretary nominee sat on the Sears board when they were making changes that created investments that were not as good as they should have been, where they've underfunded their pension system, cut back on help for health care, and he's asking for promotion. I wonder what my constituent from Macomb County will be saying about that. The Treasury Secretary plays a very important role in the security of our pension system. One of the basic tenets in our country, one of the way that we support each other, the way that people have trust in the system is to know you pay into the pension, then when you retire, you get the pension. The Treasury Secretary oversees implementation of the Multi-Employer Pension Reform Act and serves on the board of trustees of the pension overseers. I asked Mr. Mnuchin in committee, what is your position on the Multi-Employer Pension Reform Act, which Treasury is responsible for administering? How do you propose to shore up our multi-employer pension system and protect people who are counting on their pensions? His answer was, "You have my full commitment to work with you to find solutions to the multi-employer pension crisis." That's it. I resubmitted the question, hoping for a more detailed response. His amended response was, "If confirmed, I will consult with you and other interested parties on the Multi-Employer Pension Reform Act of 2014. Mr. President, that's not much of an answer for the people that I represent who want to know how he feels and what he's going to do to protect their pension. The American people deserve a better answer than that. People are struggling, retirees are struggling after trusting the system and paying into their pension their whole life. The full time that they have been working, paying in, counting on having that. Dignity in retirement. We need a Treasury Secretary who understands that a pension is a promise. Mr. Mnuchin's actions have not demonstrated that he understands that. Even when it comes to something as basic as Social Security, during our Finance Committee hearing, Mr. Mnuchin couldn't tell me the average monthly benefit when I asked him, which, by the way, a third of our seniors virtually rely on that alone. And the rest are putting together a small pension, and most seniors are counting on Social Security and their pension to have dignity and a quality of life in their retirement. And the Treasury Secretary is a key overseer of the laws and the management process and accountability for both of those systems. So for me, this is a very big deal, who's in this spot in terms of how this affects working people, middle-class families, retirees. Let me speak about one other thing. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention that when I asked him what the average Social Security payment was per month, which he could not answer, he also couldn't tell me what he meant about a cut in Social Security. If he wasn't going to cut, what that meant. Does that mean putting in place a lower cost of living? What does it mean? And he did not answer that. Let me talk about another pretty basic area. Pensions, critically important. So is the ability to have a home. You know, and up until the financial crash and the disaster in 2008 and 2009, most families' savings for retirement, savings to be able to put the kids in college, was through the equity in their home. And in 2008, 2009, for millions of Americans, that disappeared. Mr. Mnuchin has made his career profiting from misfortunes of working people, and let me talk about the financial crisis and how he benefited from that as well. During the financial crisis, he put together a group of investors to purchase IndyMac Bank, which they renamed One West. During that time, One West was notorious for taking an especially aggressive role in foreclosing on struggling homeowners. One West Bank pushed people into foreclosure and made their last-ditch efforts to save their homes through a mortgage modification or other means, all but impossible. When their voices were not allowed at the hearing on his confirmation, I was pleased to join with colleagues in putting together a forum where homeowners who had been impacted could share their experience. We held this forum for homeowners who were repeatedly given hope by One West that they might be able to avoid foreclosure, only to have it snatched away every time. One small business owner at the forum told us her story of how One West defrauded her and ultimately foreclosed on her. She told us that, quote, "Despite how difficult One West made the process, I did everything I was told because I wanted to keep my house." And twice, she applied for a loan modification. She submitted 2 checks with her new modification offer. One West cashed the checks. They cashed the checks, but told her that both offers were never received. Wait a minute, what's that? They cashed the checks, then told her the offers were not received, and therefore her offer was void. Eventually, she said, quote, "I received a knock at my door and a man introduced himself as the owner of my house." Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Shortly thereafter, she had to leave her home. One West, Mr. Mnuchin's company. This is one of the many stories about One West abuse in search of profit. And when One West Bank sold, Mr. Mnuchin and the other wealthy investors made about $3 billion. Billion dollars off the backs of folks who lost their homes, and many, like the woman we heard from, who have tried desperately to work it out to keep her house. I wonder if the checks they cashed from her after they said they didn't get them were part of that $3 billion. Finally, Mr. President, I want to express my concern over statements that Mr. Mnuchin made at the Finance Committee hearing that just don't line up with the facts. In particular, Mr. Mnuchin was asked whether his bank, One West, robo-signed foreclosure documents. Now, to be clear on what this is, banks during the foreclosure crisis had sworn documents robo-signed, automatic signed. It's like an auto pen. So they foreclosed on families quickly without anyone actually reading the documents. They just signed the papers. Nobody reviewed them to see whether or not it was right, whether or not it added up, whether or not they could help somebody keep their house. They had the machine signing. Foreclose. Mr. Mnuchin said in the hearing his bank didn't do that. He said his bank didn't do that. The Columbus Dispatch did an investigation that found that One West did do that in Ohio. A source in Texas reported that One West did do it in Texas. In New Jersey, they temporarily banned One West from foreclosing on homeowners at all in New Jersey because of its history of robo-signing documents. Sign. Don't look at it. Just sign away. We heard the story of one woman who lost her house because of 26 cents difference. Wonder if she was in one of those piles. They just signed and signed away. Mr. Mnuchin said they didn't do that. There's evidence to the contrary. Mr. Mnuchin also forgot to disclose to the committee that he owned a company organized in the Cayman Islands. And when I asked him about that, his best defense was that I did not use a Cayman Island entity in any way to avoid paying taxes myself. And at the time I said, oh, so you just helped other people avoid paying their taxes. We find out now he did use it to help foreign investors avoid paying U.S. taxes. And I have a funny feeling that he made money by helping those investors avoid paying their United States taxes. He also forgot to disclose that he owned $95 million in real estate in various locations. You know, I forget that all the time. You know, people, so many houses all over the place, it's easy to forget, right? So $95 million in property that he forgot to disclose. He said he didn't know that his real estate was an asset. He didn't know his real estate was an asset. That's alarming. Mr. President, I don't mean to be flip, but this is so shocking when I listen to some of this. As the idea that we would believe some of this statement as somehow making sense. You know, that's why we as Democrats in the Finance Committee, before his final confirmation vote, asked that he be required to come back in and answer questions. Because these are serious questions. Mr. President, this nominee has not been properly vetted. He supports policies that do not have the interests of working men and women in Michigan at heart, or people across the country. He has supported policies that don't protect pensions of hardworking men and women in Michigan and across the country, and people's retirement systems. And I don't know where he really is on Social Security, which is the other big piece of the promise we make as Americans when people pay into Social Security and are counting on it being there. And he has personally profited off the misfortune of those who need help the most. I urge my colleagues to join me in voting no.